Welcome to the January 2023 Drinking Water Advisory Work Group. We really appreciate you coming. We have a really full schedule this morning. We actually had to kick some stuff to the next quarter, so hopefully we've got some good content for you and an opportunity also just to network a little bit and ask some questions and have hopefully a discussion back and forth instead of us just vomiting towards you. So we'll go ahead and get started. My first thing would just be a quick little introduction. For those of you who are in the actual room, we have kind of mingled a little bit, but if you need to actually do anything while we're here, there are restrooms just outside. The women's is on this side and the men's is in a mirror position on the opposite side of the elevators. There's drinking water fountains and there's also a small cafe just outside of the men's bathroom if you need to grab a coffee or chips or something like that. We also have vending machines. The wall behind you shares with a break room. And if you need a Coke or something like that, there's also that option. We're going to go ahead and power through this morning from the 9 to 10 spot with some updates. And if you can feel free to step out at any point in time. In order for us to make sure that people are able to join online if they want to catch us at that first presentation, if we happen to end before 10 a.m., we'll do a short break and regather at 10 a.m. So first and primary is to say, I wanted to let you guys know that we've had some changes in the water supply division. Currently, our director position is vacant. I am acting as the acting deputy director. Carrie Michelle has been promoted to the director of the Office of Water. So if by any chance you have something that can be accomplished in the water supply division, you typically would have reached out to Carrie Michelle, please reach out to myself instead. We also have two new assistant deputy directors, and they're both here, so I'd like to have an opportunity to introduce them to you. So Gulay, would you like to go ahead first?
Yes, sure. Hi, my name is Gulay Ake. I am coming from actually Waste Permits Division. I was a section manager of the Industrial and Hazardous Waste Permit section. My background is in civil engineering. I'm a PE. And I'm very happy and glad to join this great team of people here. And I'm here to assist you all if you need me.
We're very excited to have her. So you'll see her attending meetings and stuff like that as we move forward working with you guys. We also have Ms. Janelle Crane, our other newest assistant deputy director, which also means the special assistant spot is open. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out. It will be posting. Go ahead, Janelle.
Hi, I'm Janelle Crane, and you guys may have known me as the special assistant for the water supply division for about 8 years, and now I'm one of the assistant directors, as Michelle said, assistant deputy directors. My background is mainly from the TCEQ, so I was a region investigator for many years prior to coming to the water supply division. I worked in the Harlingen region, the DFW region, and the Abilene region. Mainly public water system investigation, but I've also done air and waste during those years also. So I come from a background of mainly public water systems across the state in many different areas. And then as a special assistant for the division of the water supply division, I have a large background of all the programs in the water supply division, and I'm happy to assist or provide any guidance that you guys need.
Thank you, Janelle. Beyond that, I have a few updates just in general. We are really working to make sure that with the new year, things are up and running and easy for you guys to use. And to do that, we have quite a few updates about our QAPP, which Jessica, our QA manager, will be in to speak with you about today. That also means that if you are a laboratory or you are and not attending these, we do have some separate laboratory stakeholder groups that are an option for you all to attend, where they have very lab-specific stuff that's less aimed at the public water systems. So if you're interested in that and not already receiving those invites, please let us know, and we'll be sure to get those out to you. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and start with our first formal update of the morning. Teresa Etheridge with the Occupational Licensing Division is joining us virtually this morning. And if you haven't seen it already on our DWOG website, they have given us updated statistics related to those, and they are posted there for your reference. So Teresa, would you like to go ahead and join us and give us your updates for your division?
Good morning. Yes, thank you for having me. I don't have any updates to inform you of. I do have a correction to make to the numbers that were supplied under the BPAT category on the second page, where it talks about total applications received increased by 53.2%. My apologies, that should actually say 3.2%. Otherwise, everything else is provided to you. One other thing I'll draw your attention to was questions about the trends for water operations companies. And that's been added to page 2 as well down at the bottom, just for your reference.
Does anybody attending in person or online have any questions for the Occupational License Division? Any questions related to education or licensing renewal? Okay, appears not. Thank you very much, Teresa. We appreciate it.
No
The
problem.
next would be Latricia Spikes, who is with our Office of Compliance and Enforcement, our Field Operations Division, and just wanted to check to see if there were any updates from OCE.
Good morning, everyone. No, we do not have any updates at this time for OCE. Thank you.
Anybody have CCI questions or anything that would be most appropriate to address to the Office of Compliance and Enforcement? All right, does not look that way. No problem. Then let's go ahead to our first in-office or in-person presentation. Joel Klump, our manager of the Plan and Technical Review section, is joining us this morning and has some updates for his section.
Should I just give it from here?
Yeah, I think I can see you pretty well on this camera, so as long as people can hear you, we're good to go.
So good morning, everybody. Very brief updates from the Plan and Technical Review section. We continue business as usual, processing about 200 plan submittals a month, 100 exception requests a month. The biggest item for us to announce as far as a change is the publication of a direct potable reuse guidance manual. And I will be giving a presentation to go into detail on that at 11:15. That's it for me.
All right, fantastic. The next item is myself, the drinking water standards section. We are rotating through acting managers for that section right now as I take on acting deputy director duties. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate through my team leaders to give you any updates related to their teams. So that way you are getting it straight from the horse's mouth. So Casey, I'm calling on you first.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Casey Stinson. I'm team lead for the drinking water quality team. Major updates right now. We're sending out postcards related to the disinfectant level quarterly operating report. Try to encourage people to come back and report electronically. The system's been stabilized and improved, and we highly recommend that folks give that a try. Also, there is a new SWMOR reporting form that folks can utilize. If you have any questions about that, you're welcome to reach out to me or my compliance officers.
You want to mention PFAS?
Right now we are doing some PFAS sampling across the state. We are trying to sample systems that are not part of the UCMR 5 program. So we're going to be doing some broad sampling across the state. That is going to be the responsibility of the system is just to coordinate with our samplers, meet with them. We are paying for the analysis, and these are going to be non-compliant samples that we're collecting.
Please work with them. We really appreciate it. The end goal is to get more of an idea of what we're actually having, if we actually have a problem or not. We have done some sampling thus far and seen what I would consider to be encouraging non-detects, and we'd like to see that continue. So please, if you are contacted, feel free to coordinate with them. If you have any concerns, of course, feel free to raise it to Casey or myself, and we'll address those appropriately. Wait, oh, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Are these the same parameters as UCMR 5 that y'all are doing?
Yes.
In non-UCMR systems?
Correct.
Okay.
We are not doing lithium, just the 29 PFAS.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Claire.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Carlton, and I am the team leader for the drinking water assessment team. I don't have any major update at this point. We primarily do assessments for level 1, level 2 assessments. So we're working on those.
And we'll keep working on those. If your system has to do one, we'll be reaching out to you and coordinate information with you on that. The other thing we are doing right now, and it doesn't affect y'all directly, but we are working with laboratories to try and get them switched over and reporting with a new laboratory ID. So if some of you have laboratories on your end that you deal with directly or you manage, we will be working with those laboratories to get that information updated. And so it'll be a transition. And I think Jessica will speak some more to that potentially later.
Since Claire gave her update, there's a question for Casey in the chat related to the SWMR update. Did you want to give more information on that?
Oh, I'm taking a look now just to make sure that the correct revision is showing on the web page.
And just, if you're using the singular combined form, that's the latest and greatest. We've taken all the different sizes and functionalities, condensed them down to a single form, so that way you're always getting the most up to date. And it's also compliant with all the updates they've made to Excel. And it also offers a whole bunch of features like the ability to print out an incomplete report, which is really fantastic if you're having a violation or if you want somebody to review it on a daily basis. So I'd highly encourage, if you do not have that, to grab that form. Laura?
Yeah, so my name is Laura Higgins. I'm the team leader for the lead and copper monitoring team. Things for our team are usually fairly busy around the end of our compliance period. So actually today, as luck would have it, is the last day to report for the second 6-month monitoring period that ended December 31st. So we'll start running compliance on that here pretty soon. Always a busy time. But other than that, our template for the lead service line inventory was published in December. We're going to do a talk on that this afternoon about going through the final form. But in addition to the form, we're also working on additional resources such as an instructional video to complement the form so that people can be successful when they go to submit their inventories in 2024. I think those are our major updates.
All right, thank you. Stephen, I know that you're about to give an update. If you wouldn't mind moving towards the middle, it turns out that we can't.
I'll turn my video on.
Okay, fantastic. I just realized that the far right corner there is not showing up in our video feed.
So I'm not going to turn on my sound though, because I think that'll give us reverb. So hopefully everybody can hear us. Good morning. My name is Steven Swearinga. I'm the manager for the Drinking Water Special Functions section. I have just a quick update related to boil water notices. Over the holidays, we had Winter Storm Elliott that I'm sure many of you were affected by. We had about 230, just shy of 230 systems go on a boil water notice during that time, and just wanted to bring up a couple of things to help folks with reporting that information and to make sure that we're getting all the information that we need and get it timely. So so when you're filling out the certificate of delivery or you're reporting, we really need to know whether or not it's your entire system or just a portion of the system that's affected. When you don't report that, we assume that it's the entire system, but we'd like to be able to be more exact in that. So if you would mark that, we would appreciate that. Also, just a clarification on rescinding for boil water notice. When you get a sample result back that's negative, you can lift your, you can go ahead and do the rescind notice and then provide that information to us. You have 10 days to provide that information to us. You need to notify us within 24 hours of the notice and then also within 24 hours of the rescind. Also just a reminder, we saw folks using older templates. We haven't published new templates recently, but there are new templates out there. And I think Sean was going to drop those into the chat for us so that you guys could have access to that. Also, if you send an email to the boil water notice email box, which is boil water or BWN, if you would, if you send an email to that, you will get an automatic reply back that has links, has many links, and maybe Sean, you can drop that whole email message back into the chat so that everybody can have those links. Those links provide all the information that you need to do a boil water notice, including a link to this handy dandy, everybody here and everybody here, our quick guide really for how to do boil water notices. So, and then on other news, we have some staffing updates. We've hired two new folks, Daniel Tomlinson, who will be doing our GUI program and working on learning some of our GIS tools. And then Jacqueline McClure, who will be joining us to help support our inventory endeavors. So if you have a chance to talk with them, welcome them, and be gentle with them. They're new. So the new hires are hard to come by. So I don't know, are there any questions related to boil water notice?
It looks like we have received at least one. Do you have any guidance regarding steps to take during a boil water notice for universities who are not PWSs, but are responsible for ensuring drinking water safety for university population? So I guess my question to you, Sahashri, sorry if I've said that wrong, I'm sure I have. Could you provide some detail? Is your university part of another public water system? And you are just asking this as a customer of a public water system?
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sure can.
Yes, you're correct. So basically, we have campuses all over the state, and we're provided water by whatever city, the closest city that we're located in. But as far as, on the other side of the meter, of course, we work with the cities, on can we maintain pressure? What are the chlorine levels and things like that? But we still have a large population on campus that, the cities are overwhelmed themselves during these boil water notices. So on our end, we end up being responsible to make sure the chlorine levels are high enough, this water is safe to drink on the customer side of the meter. So as far as it, we're not officially a PWS, but yet a lot of our staff is monitoring pressures, taking chlorine readings, working with the cities that are the PWS. Is there any guidance for what steps you recommend we take on our end as we work through the boil water notice?
Sorry, just one more clarifying question. You're monitoring chlorine, but you're not actually, like, you have no chlorination yourself?
Correct.
Okay, then really it's just about transparency, making sure that your customers are informed. That's the number one thing. So in your case, making sure your students are informed and your faculty are informed. Really working on, if you have the ability to email everyone to let them know about the boil water notice, or if you have your own Blackboard Connect or whatever your internal notification system is, making sure that they know that. And then of course, if you have housing, making sure that potentially notices are available in housing so that they can see those things. And we do have, not we, but the Department of State Health Services has some guidances about what to do in the case of a boil water notice, especially if you're running a cafeteria or a dining hall or those types of things. So having that ahead of time and knowing what your plan is can make a huge difference. And also how to run a restaurant during that time frame. So if you have coffee shops or you have something in the student union, making sure that that communication happens ahead of time so people know how to continue business with as little disruption as possible. We can, and this is something I want to tell everybody, you can continue to have school just because you've had a boil water notice. There are ways to work around that to make sure that people are protected, and yet life goes on. So we have resources available, or we can point you to resources that exist other places. And then so beyond the actual transparency portion, which is the primary concern, is just being communicative and already having those communication pathways built between you and your provider. So if they are relying on you to check pressures, they are relying on you to check chlorine residuals, to have a way that you're reporting those back to them quickly and clearly, and they know what those expectations are of you, and you know what the expectations are of them. And just making sure that you also, to a certain extent, know what the minimums are. So that way you can kind of tell litmus test, is this good enough or is this not good enough? So if you're a chloramine system, 0.5 chlorine. If you're a free chlorine system, a 0.2 chlorine, and then making sure that the pressures are good. Typically that would be a 35 minimum pressure, but if by any chance there was a hurricane or a major fire or something that makes it an emergency condition, we'd be talking if you can hit mute, turn off, yeah, done, thank you. Then that would be the primary thing, is to make sure that you kind of at least know the black and white binaries of what you should be communicating up and when it's a big issue versus whenever it's just a maintenance issue. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of our challenges is just
I think we lost you. You went mute.
kept getting muted. One of the challenges is the staffing for us to, every time we have a boil water notice issued, that the staffing is a challenge to ensure across all our campuses, all the steps that we have to take. And so we were just wondering if the TCEQ had any guidance as to what steps we should be taking, or is that something we need to work with the city that is the PWS?
Yeah, I think there is a component of needing to work with the city, but also, like Michelle mentioned, there's a Department of State Health Services guidance document that may be helpful for you all as well. Although
Okay.
you may have more things than what are captured in that document, but it'd at least be a good starting place to understand kind of what needs to be done during the boil water notice.
Okay, thank you.
And I've asked staff to drop that document into the links as well. So
Thank you so much.
it'll get added before the end of the meeting for sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
I wasn't seeing, oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was just saying, those were my updates for drinking water standards or
Very good.
special functions. Old habits die hard.
Yeah, it is the way it goes. So just like I am covering acting division director or acting deputy director, as well as making sure that the standards continues to move forward, Janelle has jumped in and she is our acting manager for the emergency preparedness response section. So she's here to give us the updates related to that section.
Good morning again. Can you see me on the camera or do I need to?
I can see you on the camera as long as people can hear you. So
I can talk really loud. So like Michelle said, I'm Janelle Crane again, and with Brittany Teakle was the previous section manager. She has moved to a position over in Office of Compliance and Enforcement, which we're super excited for her. And then I am right now acting for the Emergency Preparedness and Response section. We have a few updates. So this section is the one that takes care of our emergency preparedness program. So I was just going to give you a quick numbers update on the numbers of EPPs, emergency preparedness plans, and waiver requests that we've received. So we have received 3,598 EPPs under Senate Bill 3. And then since Senate Bill 3 was enacted, we've also received 146 EPPs for Senate Bill 361, which was back for, I think, from 2010. So we are very busily working through those to review and approve them. And we thank everyone for being extremely responsive when we're asking questions and updates. We know that this was a big lift for you all, and we appreciate all of y'all's help in that. Do we have any questions on EPPs in general? I like it. And then on top of that, did I say the waiver numbers? I don't think. Okay, and then we've received 256 waiver requests. So we're working through those also. So I mean, that's a lot. It's almost 4,000 submittals that we've received. So we appreciate your patience with us as we roll through those. In that team that takes care of the EPPs is also our financial, managerial, and technical assistance contract. So if anyone out there or in the room needs some free training for their public water systems, please reach out to fmt@tceq.texas.gov. That's their email address, and they can provide assistance to you all to your public water systems. It's free. I know we talk about this all the time, but we are here to help you guys be successful as public water systems. And so if there's some training, if you have some new people coming in, and you need some extra assistance, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to send that assistance. On the other side of the section is our Texas Optimization Program. Anyways, so our top team is currently working on finalizing some travel plans for the year, and we would like to extend or offer for one of our top members to come out to any of your utility meetings or utility organization meetings that are across the state. We know that there's chapter meetings going on a regular basis through a lot of the organizations, or even in your cities or municipalities, or in your operations companies. And we're happy to provide some training. So I have a list. So some of the trainings that we have provided in the past and will continue to provide are water system resiliency. Definitely a big focus after Winter Storm Uri and then Winter Storm Elliott. Any resiliency efforts, as we are a big state, we have big events. So there's tornadoes, there's hurricanes, there's winter storm, and then there are so many different things to kind of watch out for. So we can offer water system resiliency training at your meetings, disinfectant byproduct training, chloramine effectiveness, boosting chloramination. It's a very tricky, and so we can provide training on that. Cross connection control, revised total coliform rule, training, basic operations. There's some basic math, especially if you have some new operators and you're getting ready for some tests. We're happy to offer some training on some basic math for water operators. And then nitrification. That's a large issue that gets very complex very quickly, and so we can provide training on that. And then in general, any other trainings that you guys are wanting, we are happy to go to those or provide the training during those meetings. If you would like that training and you would like to set it up or reach out to see what we have to offer on the top side, the email address is top@tcq.texas, all spelled out, .gov. And that's all that's on my list. Thank you.
We've got a hand raised from Joe. Joe, would you like to go ahead and ask whatever you have?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Can you hear me all right?
Can. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to touch, I know that you guys are obviously aware of supply chain issues, but specific to us, we got told a 96-week lead time on our diesel to satisfy the Senate Bill 3. And I was just looking, I haven't really had any guidance on what we need to do formally. Like, I know those waiver requests are only good for 90 days. So I just don't know if TCQ has some guidance on how we want to handle the fact that it's going to be a year and a half before it gets here.
That's a great question. And we are seeing this across the board. So the 90-day extension request that you were speaking about was initially to submit your EPP to the TCQ. You could get a 90-day extension, and then if needed, you could get a 90-day extension to implement your EPP based on statute. But also the statute provided a timeline. It wasn't really a requirement, but you could submit a timeline in your EPP to be able to implement your options. For example, you have it already in your capital budget improvement plan, to put in a large generator at your one of your pump stations. But to be able to pay for that and to be able to, you needed to do multiple steps ahead of time. So you don't think it will be able to be implemented for 2 years. So that's what the timeline comes in. You can put in there what steps you're taking now to help you guys until you get your final plan in place, which could be multiple years down the road. And if you already had a timeline in your EPP and you need to update that based on new supply chain issues or extenuating circumstances, please reach out to our EPP program. What's the email address?
I think it's been going to that PWS or the PWS DPP or whatever it is.
Yes, pwsepp@tcq.texas.gov. Remember, Texas is all spelled out. And we'll be able to assist you on those. If you have already submitted your EPP and you need to update it, you may not need to send, okay, let me rephrase this. If you've submitted your EPP and you have not heard from a reviewer yet, and you need to update your EPP, you may, if you want to, wait until you hear from your reviewer, and then you can update it at that time, or you are welcome to provide an updated timeline or updated EPP in the interim. But you may want to wait until the reviewer, because we're going to contact you no matter what during the review time frame to let you know what's going on and what we're seeing in your EPP. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
That opens a fantastic question I was going to ask everyone. So I did want to check in, everybody in this, everyone who's participating from a public water system has to do an EPP at this point. So I wanted to kind of see what issues you're running into, and I was hoping that you'd be willing to share. This goes out to everyone who's online too. I want to know, are you seeing similar lag times that Joe brought to our attention? Are you seeing that you can't get the size you need or the scope you need, or you can't get the quick connect? So I'd like to sit quietly for a few minutes and give you an opportunity to share if you're willing.
I'd say that in Fort Worth, I know we're working toward it, but we are seeing supply chain issues. I mean, we're still trying to move forward, but it's slowing parts of the projects down from what we may have anticipated. We don't know yet. We're looking at revising the timelines, but we may have to on some of them just because of the steps that it's taking and the time to get some of the materials.
And you bring up materials, so I'd also like to open this up to say that I know that some of you are being proactive, where you've gone through and you've found some lead service line and you're wanting to change those out. Are you having any issues obtaining, the work to do it? Because you'll do the public side potentially, but you're having to coordinate with a private side contractor. And then do you have the materials to make that happen?
I don't think so far in Fort Worth. We were far ahead of the change in the supply chain issue. So most of our services have been replaced already on the private side. But it still takes time to move through that process and get everything done.
I will say that our field operations group has told me, this is Fort Worth again, that just in normal maintenance activities in the system, they are seeing having more difficulty obtaining the smaller diameter pipe materials.
Anybody online have any updates or information about struggles that they're seeing? We'd like to, take into account what realities you're facing as we move forward with our rules and our expectations and our guidance, and any way we can potentially help you with those. So if you're willing to share, we're obviously very interested in that information. Okay. Well, that remains the ability to always let us know. I think we've addressed all of the, oh, here we go. Earl Foster indicated that the general generator supply issues are a moving target. Earl, are you trying to order something and, you know, they are telling you the date and revising it further and further out each time? Okay, and that's what's going on? Okay. Well, hopefully you'll eventually get a set date, but if that continues to happen, just let us know, because I know a lot of people had to buy a lot of generators, and it's not like you create a generator overnight. Which is also another question is, looking forward to the lead and copper rule, there will be an amazing market need for pitcher filters. Have people already looked forward to pitcher filters? Are you seeing any issues obtaining what you need there?
So we went out for RFP and we contracted with 2 different pitcher filter vendors because we do anticipate it's a federal mandated rule, so it's not just in Texas where it's not that many. But I will say there are different types of pitcher filters. And so because in Fort Worth, we have an ordinance that requires fluoride, we wanted to make sure that our pitcher filter did not remove fluoride from our system. So we had to do a little bit of research to make sure we were staying within the guidelines of our public water system.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
There are some pitcher filters, I think, that are 6-month supply, and some of them are only 3. So you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples if you're going out looking at that. We looked at it also for our daycares, if they potentially get exceeded, to be able to provide them with pitcher filters as well. So we're looking at quite a few things.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate it. I did, we have a group that works with other state administrators called the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, or ASDWA. And there were several filter companies at the latest conference. And I was just very interested to know whether they reached out to you all and whether you were hearing that, and whether anybody was making moves forward. So thank you for filling us in. Well, our next presenter is going to be an external presenter. I don't think they're on the line. So let me go ahead and check that real quick. And if not, we may take a break until the 10 o'clock hour to get back on schedule unless anybody has additional questions or concerns. Yeah, it looks like we have not had her join yet. So that said, I'll go ahead and put us on a break until 10 o'clock. And apologies for the being extremely timely on our agenda. How often is that? All right, we'll see you guys again at 10 o'clock. All right, folks, it is 10 a.m. Thank you very much for rejoining us. We appreciate it. We should be able to get right back on here. And yes, I see she is available. So thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us. Joining us this morning is Jillian Toothman. She is here to discuss the EPA's unregulated contaminant monitoring rule number 5. And she is actually with us by way of the Environmental Protection Agency. So thank you very much for offering this opportunity for us to hear from y'all.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Jillian Toothman. I'm actually the database manager for UCMR. So I'm everything SIDWARS, but I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. Let me switch over to my presentation really quick. All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit of background on UCMR and UCMR 5. I'll try not to belabor the point too much. I mean, get into the pertinent information, but then we'll go into general requirements and we'll talk about small PWS workflow in SIDWARS along with small PWS sampling. Now, I'm not forgetting large systems in there. There is some stuff I'm going to touch on with large systems as well, some of the things that coincide with both. And then we'll go through some reminders for large systems, and I've got some contacts and resources for you at the end. So starting with the quick overview of the program, CIDWA, as amended in '96, established the UCMR program to monitor for no more than 30 contaminants, unregulated contaminants, in drinking water every 5 years. UCMR collects nationally representative occurrence data for these contaminants that can be used for future EPA decisions on protecting public health. The data set from the UCMR program is then made publicly available through the National Contaminant Occurrence Database, also known as NCOD. So there are two key changes that we need to keep in mind that have happened to UCMR in recent years. America's Water Infrastructure Act, OWIA, and the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, specifically for fiscal year 2020, both had impacts on UCMR. OWIA changed the requirement from a representative sample of systems serving less than 10,000 to all systems serving between 3,300 and 10,000, and then a representative sample of those serving less than 3,300. This is assuming that we have appropriations to do so, because EPA is still going to be paying for the shipping and analysis for all systems serving less than 10,000. NDAA, on the other hand, doesn't impact the number of systems required to monitor, but actually impacts what UCMR is going to monitor. So NDAA requires UCMR to monitor for all per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, we all know what they are, that have a drinking water method validated by the administrator. So to put OWIA's impact into numbers, you can see here that EPA will be monitoring for 800 small water systems, very small and small, so those serving less than 3,300. And then now we'll have just over 5,000 water systems serving between 3,300 and 10,000, assuming available appropriations. This shifts the total number of PWSs in UCMR 5 to just over 10,000. We'll hit real quick the sampling frequency, most of it staying the same. We're still doing 4 monitoring events for surface water within a year and 2 for groundwater. And we are only doing the entry points for this particular cycle. And in accordance with NDAA, UCMR 5 is monitoring 29 PFAS across 2 methods, EPA 533 and EPA method 537.1. There's several contaminants in 533 that you see bolded here. Those are ones that were monitored in UCMR 3, but we now have new lower MRLs, so they're being monitored again in 533 for UCMR 5. And in addition to that, we threw in lithium with 200.7, or there's 2 alternate methods that can be used. So now that we've covered kind of the broad things of what's going on in the program, let's talk about large PWS responsibilities, just kind of at the high level for right now. Large PWSs are responsible for their own analysis, and therefore they must contract with UCMR 5 approved labs. The final lab list is available now at this website. You can also Google for it. UCMR 5 labs should bring you to that same page if you want. You'll then need to coordinate with your lab for shipping of samples according to your schedule in CIDWARS. Your lab has 90 days from sample collection to upload the data. And that's to CIDWARS, the thing that my project, my baby. And then you'll have 30 days once they've loaded it and approved it for you to approve it. If you do not approve within 30 days, CIDWARS will automatically approve that data for you. So once your data is approved by either of those mechanisms, then it becomes available to the state and to EPA. These approvals are why it's so important to get a CIDWARS account so you can view and approve your data. So now we'll cover the high level of small PWS responsibilities. So small PWSs also have to get a CIDWARS account. You can have as many, this goes for large and small, you can have as many people for your water system have CIDWARS accounts as you want. There is no limit, and later on we'll take a look at how you can nominate people from your water system. Small water systems have to complete some pre-sampling activities in CIDWARS. And then as a reminder, EPA pays for the small sample analysis and shipment. So after that, once you've completed your pre-sampling stuff, all you have to do is collect the sample and ship it out. So now let's take a little look at what you're actually doing in Sidwars. I'm going to kind of hit the overview here, and then we'll go into what it actually looks like in Sidwars in a minute. So this kind of covers the pre-sampling tasks that should have been completed before this year, but most of them, if you haven't completed them, are still available. So there's still time to fill it out, but please do it as soon as you can. Some of these steps are slightly different between large and small systems, but we'll go over both. The one in blue is the only one that is small systems only. So the first thing everybody's got to do is log into CDX and accept the notification letters. If you haven't done that yet, that's your first step. You won't be able to do anything else in Sidwars until you accept that notification letter. You're also responsible for having accurate inventory in Sidwars. The inventory entry period is closed for large PWSs. So if you need to make a change, or if you don't have inventory yet, you need to contact the sampling coordinator to make those changes. Small systems are going to follow the same procedures that they would have last year, which is contacting our implementation coordinator to make changes to their inventory. And we'll look at those steps in a minute. Everyone also needs to enter their zip code served and answer their UCMR 5 data element questions, plus review their schedule. As a reminder, schedule is at the location level, so large systems in particular that may have a lot of EPs can choose to spread out their monitoring if they want to. But at this point, those changes do need to go through the sampling coordinator. So you can contact that email address, and I'll have that at the end in my contact slide for you. So you can contact that email address if you want to make those kind of changes. And going back to that blue one, the only additional step for small systems that large systems don't have to complete is reviewing and approving a physical shipping address so we know where to send the kits. This can't be a PO box. It must be a physical location that can accept boxes. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more specifically about stuff in Sidwars. So hopefully everybody's already registered in Sidwars. But if you haven't, you'll need to use your customer retrieval key or CRK that was emailed or mailed to Water Systems, depending on what kind of contact information we had. All PWSs should have received one by now. So if you didn't, contact UCMR5 at glec.com. That's our implementation contractor. They have a copy of all the CRKs, so they'll be able to help you out and get you your CRK number. You'll use that number and then follow the directions in the letter to get registered. It's important to do this as soon as you can because all further communication from us is going to come through Sidwars. That's also why I mentioned to get as many people as you want in there. So whoever wants to be able to view the data or approve the data in the case of large systems, they need to have an account so they can get notifications of when that data is available. So next we'll walk through the small system data flow. Large system data flow is very similar in most respects, minus the additional steps small systems have to take. The steps you see here were to be completed by the end of last year, like I mentioned, but most items have been carried over. So there is still some time to complete all of these. And the next slide will cover the steps you see here, but I also want to mention I have the small PWS link on the screen here. I have the large and the small in my contact slide or my resources slide at the end as well. So we do have a walkthrough for large and small. It goes through all of these pre-implementation steps that you need to have completed and how to do them in Sidwars. So first step, log into Sidwars. This is what your screen will look like. And then once you get in, as I mentioned before, most important things is sign your notification letter. You won't be able to do anything else until you sign that notification letter. It's going to go away at that point, but there's still different avenues you can use in Sidwars to access it if you want to download it for your records or print it or something like that. So once you logged into CDX, you'll see this screen. You'll just have the flow for Sidwars 5, so you can select that and move on to logging in. If you are responsible for more than one PWS or you're on more than one PWS account, you'll see this screen where you can select under PWS name, or sorry, under PWS identification number, you can select which PWS you want to log in as. If you are only responsible for a single PWS, you'll go straight into Sidwars from here. So this is an example of the notification letter. You'll click the accept button once you've read through everything. And as I said, you can access it later to print or download. And there also, you can see on the right, all the way at the top, there is a print and download option there as well. We do track this notification acceptance in Sidwars, so we know when somebody is accepted or not. So the next most important thing to do is review and edit inventory. Some PWSs will have, small PWSs will have inventory locations pre-populated using information provided by their state or primacy agency. We got this information in late 2021. So please make sure that information is correct. Things may have changed since then, and we want to make sure that we've got accurate information for you. If any of it is incorrect, please make sure that you are contacting UCMR5@glec.com and they will help upload the inventory for you. You can make some minor edits to like the facility name and the sample point name, but any of the major edits about locations will need to go through that email address. You will also need to select, for small systems only, select whether the information is correct or not. If you label it as incorrect, then you should be contacting the UCMR5@glec.com email address, or if you don't get around to it, they will contact you to ask you what needs to be corrected about that location. This screen is going to remain the same throughout monitoring, so you will have opportunity to change from correct to incorrect, that kind of thing, and change your facility name and sample point name if you need to. But now that we're in the monitoring years on the large system side, you're not going to see that correct box, but everything else should look about the same for you. You also have the opportunity to change names for facility and sample point, but any other corrections, you will need to contact the UCMR sampling coordinator email address. If your small PWS does not have pre-populated inventory, you will need to, if they do have pre-populated inventory, you have these review buttons. This is kind of what I already talked about a little bit. So if you click on the pencil icon on the right, you'll be able to edit the name fields, and then you should be using the yes or no drop downs in the correct field to let us know if there's something more about that field, about that record that needs to be altered. So next is confirming or adding your physical shipping address for your kit shipment. Again, this is small systems only. Large systems should be coordinating with their contract laboratory about how they're going to do sampling. But for small systems, we ship the kit to you. The EPA contractor, GLEC, will be using the shipping address that's in Sidwars to ship the kit. So you want to make sure that that is correct. And again, no PO boxes. This has to physically accept a box or multiple boxes. When we loaded data from the state, there may have been more than one shipping address we got, so make sure you use that field on the left for preferred to tell us which one is correct and which ones are not. If none of them are correct or none were provided, you can use that add shipping address button at the bottom left. This is just an example of the kind of information you'll fill out. And because I can't say it enough, do not use the PO box. It won't accept it. And you'll have to figure out a correct address to add. So next is adding or editing zip code served. So this is a large and small responsibility. It's a one-time thing, so just get in there and get it done, and then you won't have to get our annoying email reminders to fill it out. Again, it is the zip code served by your water system, so just all the zip codes served. All right, and next on the checklist is just review the sampling schedule. EPA initially drafts those schedules Then partner states have the opportunity to review and modify those schedules. Large systems, again, at this point, you're going to have to go through the sampling coordinator to make your changes to the schedule. Small systems, if you need a schedule change, contact ucmr5@glec.com. To view your sampling schedule, you'll go to the schedule tab. This is just an example of what it looks like. If you have multiple locations, they'll each have their separate schedule listed on the correct line. The other thing you can do in this area is select responses to your UCMR5 data elements. So we have 5 questions that you're going to have to answer for UCMR5. We have disinfectant type, treatment information, historical information for PFAS, lithium detections and treatment, and potential PFAS sources. You're going to do this by selecting the blue link for a given sampling event at a location, and then selecting the question from the drop-down menu. This is a requirement for both large and small systems. It is now available for large systems. It was only available to small during the pre-implementation year, but it is available to everyone now. And we have some new features on this page to help you complete this. So once you've filled out SE1, for example, for this particular location, going to SE2, for each of the questions, you'll be able to roll over that data to your subsequent sampling event. So if you know that your treatment information is not going to change over the course of the 12 months you're monitoring, you can go ahead and pre-populate that for each of your sampling events. The other thing that we added to help you kind of figure out where you might be missing data is right up there next to that filter box. There's an exclamation point and a square. If you click on that, it's going to highlight yellow all of the sampling event, all of the locations with sampling events that are missing a response to one of these data elements. And then when you click on that sampling event, it'll highlight in red the questions that are missing a response. So if you're getting those annoying email reminders from us that you haven't completed your data elements, then you can use that button to figure out exactly what we're talking about. So shown here are kind of the examples of the forms that you're going to use to fill it out. It's mostly check mark boxes, but we're in a little bit, we're going to go through each of these questions in a little bit more detail. But before we do that, I do want to talk about nominating, since I've harped on it a couple times now. So you can nominate other individuals to serve as representatives for your water system using this nominate function. It's in the account icon, which is a little person icon in the top right of your screen. Then you'll select nominate user. It'll then generate a CRK letter for you to give to the individual you're nominating. So the new user is going to have the same rights and responsibilities that you do. So for large systems, this nominee will also be able to approve data just like you can. And keep in mind that whenever we send blast emails, it's going to go to all the users for your PWS. So if you have new data and we send the email announcing the new data to you, it's going to go to everybody who has an account. We don't have any way to send it to external users. So, if you've got a manager that wants to receive it, in order to receive that notification, they're going to have to get an account in Sidwars. This is an example of the form you'll fill out. It's just basic contact information. And then this is an example of the CRK that you'll see. So there's the number at the bottom in the red box is CRK number. You'll be able to print your PDF this for your nominee so that they can follow the same kind of directions you did to get an account. One other thing I want to highlight that's new for this cycle is we did create kind of a completion checklist for small and large systems on the home page. This is an example of the small systems. So they've got the additional shipping address in there, but otherwise it's going to look the same. Once you have completed one of these steps, it will, your status will change to has data. But if you haven't completed it, you will still have those boxes on the right. That is a link to take you directly to the element that you are missing. You can still get to all of these things through a normal menu that we've got at the top as well. But this is kind of a quick reference for you to be able to see what you're missing and what you still need to complete. All right, I've talked about it a little bit, but I'm gonna remind you again. So CDX Sidwar users are the ones who are going to receive the automated emails. So again, if you want to receive any of these emails listed here, you need to have a Sidwar's account. The emails that we're going to be sending out in an automated way are zip code completion. Those are going to come out on a quarterly basis if they're incomplete. We're going to send out sampling reminders. They're sent the month before your scheduled sampling date. And then data element completion. We do have an additional email for small PWSs because we gave them that extra time to try and get familiar with the system and get their data elements completed. If you already filled it out ahead of time, going into your monitoring year, so example, if you're a 2024 system and you already filled those out, we're going to send you a reminder at the beginning of 2024 just to check and make sure that you really have everything accurate to what's going on with your system in 2024. All right, and of course, we've got a site map. This is an example of the small PWS site map, but large systems have a similar. It is in the account icon at the top right if you need help finding what you're looking for. So now let's step back to those data elements. So we talked a little bit about what the 5 are. This table shows you what is technically from the rule, all of our data elements. Most of them are already handled through you entering your inventory. It's these ones on the right in blue that are the ones you're going to be filling out during monitoring. So we've got a couple that we've borrowed from past cycles, and then there's 2 new ones that end up being 3 separate questions. That's the historical information for contaminant detections and treatment. This is intended to capture whether PWSs have tested for UCMR5 contaminants or modified treatment before UCMR5 monitoring. Keep in mind, this is before monitoring. So when you go to answer your questions and you've already completed SE1, you don't have to say, well, I monitored for it in SE1, so now my SE2 needs to say I monitored for it. This is all pre-UCMR5 information. And if treatment was modified, you'll have to provide the historical treatment information. And then 27 is potential PFAS sources. So this one is used to identify any potential or known sources of PFAS that may impact your PWS's drinking water. So I'm going to try and cover these pretty quickly because we've still got some stuff to go through. And I want to leave time for questions. So disinfectant type is pretty much the same we've had before. It's the same options. And you do have the option to select no disinfectant if need be. Treatment information is again the same that we've had in past cycles. We didn't really make any alterations to this. But getting into historical information. So this was data element 26 from before. It's a yes or no question that you provide for each entry point. There is one question for the PFAS, and then there is a separate question that you'll answer for lithium. So those were the 2 that we saw in the drop down earlier. If you answer yes to that initial question, then you'll be prompted to select which types of treatment you implemented as a result of that. And all of these are multiple selections, so you can select more than one. And then data element 27 is related to potential PFAS sources in your drinking water. It's again, a yes, no question provided for each entry point. The question is, are you aware of any? If you select yes, then the follow-up question again will allow you to select multiple potential other sources. There is also, to note on this one, an other option if there's a source that is not listed here that you know about. It will not prompt you for further information just because we couldn't fit that in, but it does allow you to select other if that's the case. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit of timing of reporting for small PWSs. We talked about it earlier for large, so let's cover small as well. Labs are contracted with EPA for small system analysis, and they are required to load the data within 60 days of sample collection. EPA then reviews and pays for that data and approves it so that SIDWARs can make those results viewable. At that point, it is viewable to the small PWS, the state, and EPA at the same time. Small PWSs are going to get a notification that the results have been posted, but again, only if they have a SIDWARS account, so make sure you're all getting your accounts set up. And now take a look at reviewing the data for small systems. It's going to look the same for large. The only difference between large and small is large has a search screen first. So we're assuming you have more entry points than small PWSs. And then also that status box on the right is a drop down for you to be able to select your approval. Small systems, since the EPA pays for it, we review it first and make sure that it is payable and valid before we send it to you. So there's no drop down for small PWSs. So you can click on a blue link for each analyte name. And that, in this example, it's more towards the right, that blue link. That will take you to a pop-up box that has the quality control data if you want to view that. And in this example, there is no link for this particular one, but there is, if the lab entered a comment relative to this sample, the sample ID itself will have a blue link. This is just an example of the quality control data that you'll see. It is listed by the analyte that you've selected. And if you hover over the QC type on the left, it'll give you a little description of what that parameter means. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the actual sampling now that we've talked about what you're going to do in SIDWARs. Since EPA pays for the shipping and analysis for small PWSs, EPA has designed the kits and the sampling information specific to UCMR and its contaminants. So in the next couple slides, we're going to talk about what the kit's going to look like, the monitoring review sheet for small systems, upcoming UCMR sampling video, and sample tracking forms. Large systems, you have to coordinate with your contracted lab for the sampling, but much of this information has been made available to UCMR approved labs, so they may choose to use something similar or use some of the same information. So we've contracted with GLEC for implementing the small systems kit shipping. They're going to be shipping, again, to the shipping address in SIDWARs. So I can't emphasize this enough. Please make sure it is accurate and can receive kit boxes. SIDWARs is also where the inventory locations are going to be pulled from. But that's if they're available. If they're not, you may be receiving a monitoring review sheet or MRS to complete so that your inventory can be uploaded. We'll look at that in just a minute. The sampling kit's going to contain your sample bottles in Ziploc bags, ice packs, nitrile gloves, prepaid shipping label, instructions, and a sample tracking form. Just as a side note, all of our sampling kit material has been tested during our kit design process to rule them out for possible sources of PFAS contamination. So I know a lot of times we hear about using wet ice for this, but we have tested those ice packs specifically. So this is an example of the monitoring review sheet. Again, this is for if you don't have inventory, in SIDWARS and we're missing it, we may contact you using this form to fill out. I know a number of them went out last year in the summertime for small systems scheduled for this year, but I believe they've actually already sent them out for, or at least some of them out for systems monitoring in 2024. So we're kind of constantly working on it. If you get it, please fill it out as soon as you can and return it to GLAC, or you can email them at mrs@glac.com. So next, let's talk about sampling instructions and the video. Please note, all of this is very specific to UCMR 5 and the small systems. They are not intended for agency-wide PFAS sampling guidance. These are very specific to our kits and our systems in UCMR 5. Small systems are going to see a printed version, and we'll go through what's in those in just a minute. And I do want to mention we're wrapping up a sampling video. It's not quite available yet, but it's in the final stages of approval. So we'll hopefully have that out soon for you. And that is for large and small to be able to view. Small, it is specific to your kits. So large, kind of take it as an idea of what to do, but it's going to be specific to how the kits look for small systems. In small systems, if you have any questions on the sampling, contact ucmr@glac.com. That is very slightly different from their other email address, but both email addresses, UCMR and UCMR5@glac.com, both will get there eventually. All right, so there's a few general rules in the beginning to follow for sampling, including making sure you freeze the ice packs ahead of time, preferred days for shipping to avoid FedEx delays, and information about the FedEx pickup. There's also some do's and don'ts that are general to filling any of the bottles for small system sampling. And in a minute, we'll take a look at some specific to PFAS at the end of the sampling portion. And as an FYI, we do provide a pen to fill out the information on the bottles and the sample tracking form. So I'll mention that again in a minute. So next, the steps are specific to each group of bottles, and they're bagged separately according to what you're going to do with them. So bags A and B contain field reagent blanks. So the first step is you're going to put on your gloves and you're going to transfer the reagent water from one bottle to the other. These field reagent blanks are used as a control during analysis to ensure that there's not going to be any false positives. So make sure you do this step and you do it first. Then bags C and D are bottles for the actual sample collection. There's a few steps to guide you through flow rate and such for sampling correctly. And also note in the bottom, on the bottom right in red, if you're unable to pack and ship the kits immediately, then they need to be refrigerated. That'll help you avoid a resample, so don't skip that. And then the sampling instructions just go through how to repack the kit for shipping, making sure you've got all the right parts and where the ice packs go to make sure everything maintains the correct temperature. And that portion, or the sheet in blue on the left there, is the sample tracking form, and we'll take a closer look at that in just a moment. But don't forget the prepaid FedEx priority overnight shipping label that we have provided to you should go on the box. So at the end of your sampling instruction packet should have some Q&As about the sampling itself, or also contact information if you have questions about the sampling that aren't addressed here. So as I mentioned before, we have some tips for reducing cross-contamination. Some examples include not using personal care products right before sampling, anti-fog sprays, water-resistant materials such as water-repellent face masks or food wrappers before sampling, not using permanent markers. Like I mentioned before, we provide a pen so that you don't accidentally use a permanent marker instead to label your bottles. Make sure you don't touch the inside of the lid or the bottle. Don't put the lid in your pocket during sample collection. And then we also have some do's include using only the materials that we've provided, washing your hands prior to sampling, and adhering to the steps in the sampling instructions. If you want to take a look at this a little bit more closely, we do have it available as part of webinars that we did in October. We had separate ones for the large and small, but this was included in both of those. When we get to the end of this presentation, I have links of where you can go to get to that. Also, if you just want to Google the UCMR webpage, it's under the link to meetings and materials. This is an example of the STF form, sample tracking form. It's going to be printed on blue paper for a primary sample or the first attempt at a sampling event. Just make sure you fill it out. You basically just have to sign it and date it and make sure that it makes it back into the kit when you ship it out. And this is an example of a resample kit. It'll be printed on pink paper instead, so you can differentiate. And if there was an issue that is preventable, so not some sort of lab issue, but perhaps a collection problem that happened, we're going to include some tips. So for example, the original kit failed temperature because the ice packs weren't thoroughly frozen. They were, cold, but not frozen solid. We're going to include tips to make sure that to freeze it solid. So pay attention to those tips because they are specific to the resample that we're needing from you. All right, now that we've gone through all that sampling stuff and focused a lot on small systems, let's take just a minute to cover some reminders for large PWSs. So please ensure that you have the correct inventory in CIDWARS and that your schedule is what you want it to be. This is very important because we're going to adhere to that schedule and that inventory. If it's wrong, we won't know until you tell us. So if it is wrong, please contact the UCMR sampling coordinator. I've got the email address here for you this time. Also, you need to complete the data elements. So again, we didn't have them available for you last year, but they are available now, and you can fill them out ahead of time. So go ahead and take advantage of that, and then you won't get our annoying email reminders. Same kind of thing with zip codes. It's a one-time ask. If you fill it out now, then you don't have to hear from us about it again. And then finally, just a reminder that the final list of labs is up on our website. So if you haven't established that contract yet, please go there and start picking your labs. All right, so we're down to my reference section here. I'll try and hit this really quick so we've got a few minutes for questions. So the first one is that link to the meetings and materials page. If you want to take a look at our webinars, there's the March one, which is our final webinar for the final rule. And then October webinars were specific to what systems needed to be doing during that pre-implementation year. We've got, of course, our homepage and various fact sheets on those pages, and then the walkthrough videos. So we have the small system one and the large system one. It walks through what those pre-implementation activities are and how to get to them and how to walk through the various steps. We will be putting together one for what's happening now with review data and all of that, but we don't have it available yet. And then, of course, there's the safe drinking water information page. And then for contacts, general questions about requirements or navigating CIDWARS, you can contact UCMR5@glec.com, or they have a phone number there if you like to talk to a person. We also have the small PWS sampling hotline. So that is specific to what to do with your sampling kit or questions about your kit. And that's UCMR5@glec.com. We also have the CDX help desk. If you're having problems getting into CDX, it's helpdesk@epacdx.net, or there's a phone number. And then lastly, the sampling coordinator. If your question is about your inventory or schedule as a large system or anything else that doesn't fit neatly into these other message centers, contact the sampling coordinator. And with that, I'm going to leave this up in case you want to write any of those contacts down, but I will take some questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I don't see any hands yet, but if you do, let me know. One question I had is we in the state of Texas tend to do free chlorine conversions potentially during the hottest time of the year to address DEP issues. Is there any belief that that could cause concern with results related to UCMR 5?
Not that I'm aware of. We have, we test, of course, various matrices and various configurations as much as we can during method development, but we've also put in our various preservatives in abundance, so it should, cover those kind of fluctuations.
And noticing that you said, each time that a drop down is opened for each sampling event, you can choose disinfectant type. If they chose their routine disinfectant type, what would they need to do to change it if they were to go on a conversion?
So they could go ahead and select something different specific to that sampling event, whatever makes sense. If nothing makes sense, we do generally have like other selections, so you can select other if something has changed. So you just have to kind of make a decision based on the options that we have available right now. We are the disinfectant and treatment, we are trying to keep fairly uniform between cycles. So that's why it looks the way that it looks, is we're trying to kind of monitor that over various cycles related to various contaminants.
Is there an option for disinfectant when people are blending chloramines and chlorine within their system?
You can select multiple. So if you are using both, you should absolutely select both.
Is there an option if your entry point is out of service?
Yeah, so if your entry point is out of service and you're a large system, contact the UCMR sampling coordinator. If you're a small system, UCMR5@glec.com. That's the short version. The longer version is, it kind of depends on when it's out of service. So we want you to collect as many as you can, as much as it works with your system. So for example, if you're a groundwater, you collected SE1, SE2, it's down when you should technically be collecting. You still have a few months after that. If it comes back online, go ahead and collect then. If it's not going to be back online for the duration of your year of sampling, contact the UCMR sampling coordinator for large systems, and the same for small, the UCMR5 at GLEC. And they'll work with you to figure out if your schedule can be moved to accommodate when you are online with that location, or if it's going to be off for the duration of UCMR5 in total. Then we kind of take a different approach to that. So we want to get the sample as much as we can, but we'll work with you to figure out how we can do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe that the questions I saw in chat were addressed. And I did see that Jatine Mystery is, who is the coordinator for the Region 6 area, is on that chat and providing feedback to them. So thank you very much. He was nice enough to provide me with a listing of the small systems that are still in need of registering. And I'm sure he has it as well, since he provided it to me. So if you are a small system who is attending and you are concerned about whether you have or have not appropriately signed up, please feel free to reach out to one of us, and we'll be able to make sure we get that confirmed with you. And I'd like to confirm that at our end of year, which was in earlier this year, there were several large systems lagging behind. I believe we've gotten to the point where all large systems are taken care of. So hopefully, if you're a large system on the line, you have addressed your concerns. But if you have any doubts, please feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure to ensure that you are registered appropriately. Nancy did ask, what is the contact information to confirm applicability to UCMR 5?
I would contact UCMR5 at glec.com. They do have the total applicability list, and they are able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or concerns while we have Jillian on the line? Does it look that way? Anything else to add, ma'am?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. It was great to get to talk to UCMR, talk about UCMR to water systems directly. It's not often I get to do that. And I really appreciate everyone's cooperation and we'll get this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you joining us. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Would this be where you'd be willing to share the slides so that we could share them to our DWOG website?
Yes, I will.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. All right. How are people doing? We're very close to on time. So if nobody is dying for a bathroom break, I'd like to move on to our next item, which is what's new in the quality assurance project plans, which most of us just call a QAQP. And for that, we'll have our own QA specialist, Jessica Hope.
Yeah. Get my camera on so y'all see me. All right. Well, so for anybody out there who hasn't had an opportunity to interact with me or have any see me at any of these blog presentations or meetings, my name is Jessica Hope, and I am the Water Supply Division's lead quality assurance specialist for the different programs that are here in the Water Supply Division. What we'll be talking about today is what's applicable to drinking water programs, or drinking water, public water systems, which is our public water system supervision program. All right, so generally speaking, before I like to go into the details about something that's specifically applicable to everyone, the way that my mind works, and I just impose it on everybody else, is to have an idea of like the bigger picture of like why things exist, where stuff is coming from. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was just, why does the public water system supervision program, or we're also colloquially called the drinking water program or the public drinking water program, the formal name for the program here in the state of Texas is the PWSS, the Public Water System Program. So, in a big picture basis, why do we have a QAPP? And, I think everybody has different perspectives on like why things are important, and they would probably list the reasons for having a QAPP in different ways based on what they find to be important, right? So for me, being a quality assurance specialist in like the QA field for about the last 10 years here in the state of Texas and different sort of areas of it, for me, what's important and why a QAPP is really important is that structure assures quality. So I feel like that's just really important in so many different aspects and facets of like anybody's job. Structure assures quality. And I'll go into that a little bit more, but structure in quality system documentation can manifest itself in lots of different ways. So for us here in the program, we have a quality assurance project plan, right? But there's also SOPs, standard operating procedures, which are things that public water system operators should have for ensuring the quality of the work that's done within their public water system. Sampling instruction, bacteriological instructions, those are all structured quality documents. And QAPP is just another example of that. When I talk about like structure, I feel like it's really important because this is something that I get caught up on. It's not about perfect structure or perfect template. It's just about having something documented as a foundation for the way in which your programs run. And, for us, again, I'm talking about QAPPs. This is sort of the foundational structure for the way that we run our program. And, you know, when you have structure in your quality documents, it basically assures that you're going to get the same results regardless of who's performing a particular process, right? So you send out your operator with a sampling SOP. It doesn't matter if it's operator A or operator B, like they should still end up with the same result in the end. And I'm not talking about the actual analytical result, but the documentation that's reported, the field measurements, like all of those things should happen in the same way consistently, regardless of who's going out there. And that's part of the reason why we have a quality assurance program. And just in general about quality documentation. So, you know, just generally aside from that, like bigger picture, oops, sorry. Go ahead. So aside from that sort of like bigger picture principle that I find to be the most important, which is that like structure assures your quality and that you want to have documented processes, you know, for the state of Texas to maintain primacy for the rules under the Safe Drinking Water Act, one of the requirements from the EPA is for us to have a quality assurance document. It's not the only requirement by any means, but it's a part of the larger puzzle of it. And so EPA basically delegates enforcement authority, which is also called primacy, to states if they meet certain requirements. So again, our QAPP is a part of that requirement. And to speak like more generally about our QAPP in general, or specifically, our QAPP assures that the data that's used for compliance determination is reliable, it's defensible, and like it meets drinking water. Because there are specific things that are defined within our rules, within other quality documentation, like a drinking water certification manual, or within the Texas Administrative Code that are very specific to what's needed for drinking water. Our QAPP serves as a document to try and get all of that really important information and put it into a single location. So the QAP documents, and I'll show you, you know, where you can find them and whatnot, but for the most part, our QAP documents or the addenda documents that y'all would be taking a look at, they really focus a lot on the monitoring, the analysis of your samples, and the reporting of the data to the program, which like I feel it could be really easy to think to yourself, because I'm talking about, you know, the analysis and the reporting of data, that's not applicable to labs. And that like that document and that information, that's for my labs to be aware of. And I have all of my, you know, drinking water rules, Texas administrative stuff that I need to pay attention to. But the reality is that there's a little bit more nuance and roles and responsibilities that is something that we're trying to emphasize now. So I think historically, or I know historically, the program has really focused the communication of our QAP addendas to a lab audience. So I have meetings regularly where I'm talking about the QAP, and you know, I talk about the QAP with our internal folks as well. But something that we've been moving towards, and that we've actually made some updates in our current QAP, is to really emphasize the responsibility of public water system operators and representatives to be aware of these requirements of the QAP, so that way they can ensure that the laboratories that they're using to do your analysis to stay in compliance are actually meeting those requirements. You know, you can't ask a lab questions about the things that they're doing without being aware of what we're expecting, right? You know, something that you might be familiar with, just on a big picture related to labs and QAPP, that labs need to be accredited to the TNI standard. And so I think for a little while, and I was guilty of this also because I used to be an assessor over in the accreditation section, while the agency transitioned from a drinking water certification program over to an accreditation program, there was some messaging that like accreditation was what you needed to adhere to. And so a lot of labs got the idea that, only requirements listed in the accreditation standard are what are required in order to participate in the drinking water program. But the reality is that there's a lot of nuance for specific requirements that drinking water needs that are defined within a clause. And so I think that now over the last like 5 years of kind of talking about this, reinforcing the message of the importance of the clause, like that's less of an issue. But for me, again, and just having like big picture ideas, like this is where I feel like it's important to talk to public water system audiences about this. All right. So again, kind of in that big picture, kind of understanding the framework of how things work. Here's kind of just a hierarchy of the general framework of the quality system. So at the very top is the Code of Federal Regulations, right? So the federal government defines rules for public water systems. There's also definitions of rules for expectations for quality and a whole bunch of other things, right? The EPA is like, all right, we see you federal government and what you want to do. We're going to delegate the authority for these rules. And for us, it goes to the TCEQ, right? And the EPA, additionally, we've got delegation of that authority. That's minimum requirements for quality of data. And that is where QAPP comes into play. So the program then says like, okay, EPA, you want me to run this particular program. This is the way that we are going to ensure the quality of the data that's reported to us and the quality of the data that we're using to make compliance decisions. And we describe that within the quality assurance program. Stuff like that's also described within SOPs, internal SOPs. The program's been working a lot lately to produce templates of SOPs that a public water system can kind of take and make into their own. We've got regulatory guidance documents. These are other types of quality system documentation. And I wanted to talk about public water system operators and y'all's role in the framework of the quality system of the public water system supervision program, in that y'all are responsible for doing monitoring and adhering to the rules, right? Like for the revised protocol, for the LEDCOP rule. And so a major basis of y'all's quality system can be thought of as your monitoring plan. So your monitoring plan is going to be a central document that describes a lot of stuff. There's a whole, section of the rules, right, that describes monitoring plans. But within it, your monitoring plan should have documentation of your system's quality system structure, meaning these are my approved sample sites for LEDCOP rule. This is our sample siting plan for the revised protocol. This is a copy of our standard operating procedure for the way that bacteriological monitoring occurs, and things like that. So the Public Water System Supervision Program is a program of partnerships all around. And we all play a role, bigger picture. And in order for the machine to work in the way that it's supposed to, everybody's got to kind of play their part in it. And for me, again, I think that there's this huge emphasis on documenting your procedures, because that helps to assure the continued quality of that procedure. And so this is something that we're suffering from here. I get feedback from labs a lot, and I feel very confident that this is a problem with public water systems, where you're struggling to find good people, or you had a really great person and they've been there for 30 years or 40 years, and now it's their time to, retire and like enjoy the rest of their life. And you end up in a circumstance where that person held all of that knowledge, and the way that you avoid like having issues when things like that happen, because you want people to retire and like you want them to win the lottery to go on, you want them to advance in their career. Like you want all of those things to happen, but you want your organization to keep going. So, kind of veering off in different directions, but all of it is kind of centered around that circular or that central theme that documentation and structure assures the quality of the work that's done. So, if anyone have any questions? I have a fairly short presentation. I've got a couple other things going on here, but I'm really hoping to foster some open communication. Not necessarily come up here and preach at you about QA stuff because I'm really passionate. But yeah, does anybody have any questions so far? Are people here just generally familiar with the QAPP or that we have a QAPP?
And we have our own in our lab,
Yes. Mhm.
which we are currently updating.
Continuous improvement.
Always,
So,
always.
you know, just to kind of circle back to that, like, it's not about perfection. It's just about like ongoing and continuous improvement, right? So that's where I'll admit that I personally struggle with perfection. I feel like Michelle and somebody who supervised me before was just like, done is better than perfect. But it's true, you know, and then once you have something done and you work the process for a little while, you can realize the places where you're like, we didn't describe that well enough. Go in and you make improvements, make updates. So the Public Water System Supervision Program, the PWSS, recently got revised. So our quality assurance project plan is on a 3-year cycle of approval with the EPA. If you participate in other programs here at the TCEQ, they might be on different cycles. We're on a 3-year cycle, which essentially means that every 3rd year we have to submit the entirety of our documentation to the EPA for approval again. So we recently went through that process. It was a pretty big project. Our program received approval for a QUAP in late November of 2022 and also received the signed documentation from the EPA. I was able to get those documents up onto the Public Water System Supervision Program's webpage, which is the place where we always keep the most current version of any of our. So generally speaking, you're only really going to see updates to the QUAP on a 3-year basis. You can expect that. And on an annual basis, we provide an annual certification to the EPA. While we do our annual certification to the EPA saying that this continues to be accurate, we have the opportunity to make updates. So generally speaking, a good process for y'all would be to just check in around November, December to see if there's been any updates to the QAPP. You know, we'll additionally provide this information in the DWOG settings. I've got a lab for like that, just as a heads up for y'all. So the structure of the QUAP here for the drinking water program is a main programmatic document. So kind of think of that as like the big picture. Our main programmatic document is generally more applicable to things that the TCEQ staff are going to be doing in ways in which, in a big picture, we're describing to the EPA how we're going to assure the quality, how we're going to do data, how we're going to do data validation. And below that is 10 addenda documents. But when you think about our QAPP, you should think about it as one whole document. So this is our QUAP. Check it out. It's one whole document. So for ease of maintaining control of the document and making updates, that is why it's kind of separated out to 11. Okay.
Can you just be able to slide that screen over to that screen?
Yeah. No, that's his.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I'm going to the web page for the people that are. I didn't look at the chat. No one had any questions? Dude, such a great job. All right, so this is our Public Water System Supervision Program webpage, the PWSSP webpage. We're still working on making some minor updates, continuous improvement, right? But at this point, one of the big updates that's occurred is indicated by this update little right here. It's the PWSSP. I'm just going to go ahead and click down there so we can get down to the bottom. And so these. So these are the ways to access our QAPP documents. Like I said, it's divided up into 11 individual documents just to help for maintenance and also for the user to be able to go to a particular addenda versus having to scroll through 400 pages of documents to find what you're looking for. So it starts with the PWSS main QAPP document, which is up here. The QAPP documents that you are most likely familiar with as a public water system are likely going to be more the Addenda 2 document, which is the lead and copper sample collection. That's for your LCR samples, lead and copper. You might be familiar, at least labs that you're working with Addenda 3, which is going to be your water quality parameter sample collection, which is also going under lead and copper. And then you've got Addenda 4. So Addenda 4 is one that I'm just going to click on to take a look at. Since Addenda 4 is going to be a addendum which is applicable to all public water systems. All public water systems in the state of Texas are required to monitor for public water. So we made a few revisions. I think what's most important and what's new to talk about in this update to the QAPP is that we did not make major programmatic changes. So there isn't going to be any, you used to do A and now A is out the window and we're doing B. What my goal was with this revision in the sort of big picture of continuous improvement is to standardize the format that was used within the documents. So that way, if you're a lab or you're a public water system who uses or looks to addendas 2, 3, and 4, they're going to present information in a similar order. So, for example, quality control or any questions you might have about quality control is always going to be in section B10. It's in section B10 for this document, it's in section B10 for the other document. And so really what we worked to do was try to have consistent organization so that way the user is able to more easily use it. And another thing that I have, and it was a goal with that, was the potentially optimistic hope that people would make references to the QAPP within their quality document. And a way that you can make a reference to our QAP is to be able to reference a particular section. So for additional information on roles and responsibilities of the public water system, if you were writing something up within your monitoring plan, it'd be like review section A4 of addenda 4. So let me just kind of scroll down, show you what I'm talking about. So you can see here in the table of contents, every single main header has a referenceable section attached to it. And so this is the first step in trying to make this document a little bit more user-friendly and easier and more accessible to make references to it. So, that's not a substantive change, right? Aside from the fact that if you were familiar with the order that something was in before, it might be in a different place, but for the most part, all of it. One thing that is different, and that I want to talk with y'all about, is that for the first time, we are requiring laboratories to submit an acknowledgement and documentation which they are going to agree to adhere to the requirements of our community. So if you are familiar or you're a lab person already, you'll know that we already kind of had this process previously, but it wasn't formally documented within the QAPP. And so EPA, in their continuous improvement sort of post, is making updates to the requirements for QAPP, and this is our getting ahead of the game to address one of the things that they want, which is they are working towards having laboratories, or they want laboratories to actually sign quality assurance contracts. Which for most projects, like that's totally realistic. For the Public Water System Supervision Program here in the state of Texas, we have about 93 different labs that are submitting data for bacteriological monitoring. And at any point, some drop off, some new ones come on. It would be to try and like keep up with all of that actual signatures within this document. And so the way that we're addressing that is to maintain those signatures separately. So I've already started having conversations with labs about this change and letting them know they have until March to submit the acknowledgement and agreement documentation. And I gave them a little bit of time because I want labs to have the opportunity to read through this document before they provide me a signature saying that they're going to adhere to it. And so what you all are going to want to look for in Public Water Systems is an update to the lab adherence checklist. So back to my presentation, talk about all right, so like I said, standardized format. Some updates and some things that I would encourage you all to take a look at if you haven't already gone through the co-op is to take a look at the roles and responsibilities. So some messaging that's been changing here at the TCU, and I kind of have already alluded to this, is that we're all partners in this process, right? So everybody has roles and responsibilities as a part of the Public Water System Supervision Program. And so some specifically defined roles and responsibilities are now being included within our addenda document. So for example, in Addenda 4, which is the one that I just had, Public Water System has a section that lists the roles and responsibilities and expectations related to that addenda in there. And some of those expectations are being knowledgeable of it, ensuring that you're using a lab that's adhering to the co-op. And you know, there are things which you all are already doing or should already be doing, but it's the actual formal documentation of that expectation. So I kind of let you know about this required lab adherence and acknowledgement process. The reason that I wanted to bring that up to y'all was to let you know and to remind you that on that Public Water Supervision Program page, we keep a list of all of the labs that have agreed to adhere to it. So I would, because I'm giving them 3 months to submit this documentation, check in March, April, check in April to make sure that your lab is on the list. Oh no, did I lose?
We're just hearing that it might be a little difficult to hear you, so are you guys able to hear her now? Because she should be talking through the main line, not through her computer where it will show her as muted.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so getting close to the end of my time, but generally speaking, check into the PWSS webpage in April to make sure that your lab has submitted the documentation acknowledging adherence to it, because we will start taking steps to not accept that data if they have not acknowledged and agreed to adhere to the requirements of the co-op. Another thing that's going on, which may or may not, and it kind of is what Claire had touched on, we are working through the process of updating the laboratory ID that's used for reporting. So for the next probably 4 months or so, I feel like we're going to be working through some issues which may arise with documentation. And so I think what's most important is that we have regular communication with your labs and we're working through that. And I'm not necessarily anticipating that those things are going to impact your all's performance while we're making updates to our documentation. Just as a heads up.
the other things that I've got listed here are really more specific to labs and things like that that are changing for them. And
Just I have a question. The question is from Anna B. What happens if a lab does not sign it on time?
lab adherence. So I'll probably be reaching out just to see what's going on with the lab and if there's a particular reason why they have not submitted that documentation. And, I've yet to have a lab refuse to submit documentation. Sometimes it's just a matter of being aware of the requirement. So it's altogether possible that even though I'm making all the best efforts that I can to get this information into each of our compliance laboratories, they might have had a staff change and my contact for that person, for that lab's not there anymore. So I feel like it's really important for me to communicate for any of the labs that are out there also. We have reasonable expectations for implementing this new process, and we're going to work with y'all to get to a point. But the end goal and the big picture is that we would take steps to not accept data from a lab that's not agreeing to adhere to the QUAP. Because if you're a lab that's not going to adhere to the QUAP, your data is not meeting the requirements for compliance of the public water system, and it's just, you're out of compliance. I think is the best way to put that. So my contact information is my name, Jessica Hoke at tceq.texas.gov. I also created a proxy box for anybody who's in the QA role here at the TCEQ. So that way, when I win the lottery, I'm not here anymore, your emails aren't going to get lost because you have a proxy box, which like is just going to have continuity of operations going forward.
We know you're not going to quit, Jessica.
Yeah,
win the
once
lottery.
you check in, you can never check out.
That's right.
Yeah, and for any labs who might be out there in the audience who has submitted that documentation to PWS QA, I'm working through it. There's actually a long list of all of this documentation, so just give me some time. I've got another lab meeting scheduled for Thursday of this week, and so my lab meetings are obviously lab focused, right? But if you're a public water system who's interested, you're more than welcome to attend those as well. And so just shoot me an email at PWSQA and I can share with you. Anyway, thank you all for your time. I'm sorry I went over. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. Joel was going to come up and speak to us real quick about an awesome new direct potable reuse regulatory guidance.
All right, everyone. Well, I am here to talk about DPR, direct potable reuse, and there is a new guidance document that was published in November. Okay, so this is a pretty short presentation. I'm really just going to be talking about this new guidance document. We'll touch on Senate Bill 905 from the last legislative session to make sure everybody's on the same page. We'll go through some definitions for different types of reuse. I'll talk briefly about how TCEQ regulates direct potable reuse DPR projects. We'll dig a little into the guidance and then wrap up with the DPR triangle. It's something that staff have come up with. So the document is RG 634. It's 30 pages long. It is available through TCEQ's webpage. If you Google this, it should come up. Alternatively, you can go into TCEQ's webpage, click on water, then drinking water, and it will be one of the new topics towards the top. I recommend that anybody who's interested in learning more about direct potable reuse, go in, download this, and read the whole thing. All right, so Senate Bill 905 from the regular session of the last legislative session actually required TCEQ to put this guidance together. The bill was pretty short. This is it. Essentially, the bill defined direct potable reuse. And so now we actually have a definition for DPR in the Health and Safety Code. And that's great because there's been a lot of progress in the reuse field, and you can find many different definitions of DPR. So actually having this in statute, make sure that we're all talking apples to apples. After defining DPR, then the bill required the commission to develop a regulatory guidance manual to explain our rules that apply to DPR. So once again, that's what this does. All right, so to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing here, let's talk about some different definitions of reuse. The first one being de facto reuse. And so this is where treated wastewater returns to the natural ecosystem, blends with waters of the state, and then that blended surface water source is used as a source of drinking water for a downstream city. So in this case, city 1 is upstream, city 2 is downstream. You can see that the wastewater outfall for city 1 then is incorporated into waters of the state, and city 2 at some point downstream. The intake for their surface water treatment plant pulls in water that is impacted by that upstream wastewater discharge. The two most common types of reuse in Texas are de facto reuse and then non-potable reuse, where people are treating wastewater and then rather than treating it all the way to drinking water standard. Indirect potable reuse is where treated wastewater is returned to a natural ecosystem, whether that's surface water or a groundwater aquifer, before being reclaimed as a drinking water source. So in this case, we're just looking at one city, and you can see that the intake for their surface water treatment plant is downstream of their wastewater treatment plant outfall. And so that's allowing them to return their treated wastewater effluent to the environment and then recapture that downstream. But what we really want to talk about is direct potable reuse. And so I'm going to go back to Senate Bill 905. And so the Senate Bill 905 sets out two scenarios for direct potable reuse. The first one is the introduction of treated, reclaimed municipal wastewater directly into a public water system. So at its simplest form, it would look like this. The wastewater treatment plant effluent goes to an advanced water treatment plant. Then that goes directly into the city's drinking water distribution system. The other scenario that is addressed in Senate Bill 905 is a slightly more complex. And so this shows direct potable reuse as the introduction of treated, reclaimed municipal wastewater into a raw water supply immediately before the water enters the drinking water treatment plant. So in this case, you actually have blending of water from the advanced water treatment plant with untreated surface water. And then that blend is treated at the drinking water treatment plant before going to district. All right, now that we're all on the same page, let's talk about how TCEQ regulates DPR. We used existing federal and state regulatory frameworks to approach DPR. Starting with the federal side, the federal long-term 2 enhanced surface water treatment rule, also known as LT2. This requires pathogen monitoring of the source for any surface water treatment plant and may require additional treatment based on the bin classification based on the results of that pathogen monitoring. So in Texas, most surface water treatment plants have sources that are classified as bin 1, and bin 1 is the standard pathogen load in surface water. And so no additional pathogen treatment is required. It's just straight surface water treatment. You can have bin 2, bin 3, bin 4. Bin 4 is the highest level of pathogen load, and in that case, 5.5 log removal is required for Cryptosporidium. And so I'll talk more about TCEQ's process for monitoring a wastewater effluent to characterize that as the source for drinking water, but it's essentially the LT2 approach. Monitor pathogen load, determine appropriate treatment. Then on the state side, the way TCEQ reviews drinking water facilities, we require engineering plans and specifications to be sent in to cover our design standards. And those design standards ensure that the finished water meets the water quality standards found in subchapter F. Because the use of wastewater effluent as a source is an uncommon practice, and because that source can vary in quality, neither TCEQ nor EPA rules have specific design standards for DPR. And so because of that, we regulate DPR through our exception process. So the way the exception process works, it's specifically for treatment technologies without design standards. We can grant exceptions to the requirements in subchapter D of chapter 290 if the public water system can demonstrate the exception will not compromise public health or result in a degradation of service or water quality. So the use of wastewater effluent as a source is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. We review the results of studies performed by the water system to determine if the proposed treatment scheme will produce water quality that meets all federal and state water quality regulations. So as noted here on the slide, our case-by-case approach results in approving a specific plant design for a unique water source. And so this ensures protection of public health without requiring additional treatment requirements that in some cases people would describe as over-design. All right, so what's actually in this regulatory guidance document? We go through an overview of treatment requirements, both pathogens and chemicals. We address the necessary operator requirements, both at the DPR plant and the wastewater treatment plant that is supplying the source. And then we also talk about, while this document was prepared by staff and Water Supply Division, there are other program areas within the agency that need to be involved. So we also talk about the requirements of the Water Quality Division. This division reviews and issues wastewater permits, as well as reclaimed water authorizations, and reviews treatment design for wastewater treatment plants. To be considered for use as a source of drinking water, a wastewater treatment plant needs to be compliant with their discharge or land application permit and reuse authorization. Also within the Water Quality Division is the pre-treatment program. So since achieving the necessary chemical treatment is a big part of a DPR plant, it's also important for our pre-treatment program to be involved because the pre-treatment program directly impacts the types of chemicals that are included in the sewer shed for the wastewater treatment. And then also our Water Availability Division needs to be involved. So This division reviews and approves applications for surface water rights permits and also processes water supply contracts. Water rights permits include specific types of use, locations where the water may be used, and may also include special conditions related to the use of the water. If a public water system uses surface water, it either has a water right permit or a contract for surface water with another entity, like a river authority. Each permit and contract is different, and the water system needs to ensure they understand the requirements of the permit so that they're not violating anything they're pursuing a DPR project. We also talk about a variety of other considerations like community involvement. Reuse is becoming more and more common, not just in Texas, but across the country. However, there's still a lot of concern on the part of the community. So any DPR project, communication has to start early, and there needs to be regular updates on it. We also briefly talk about the cost for a DPR plant. Due to the amount of treatment necessary to clean wastewater treatment plant effluent to drinking water standards, cost of engineering, construction, and operations. So anybody considering DPR should go in with their eyes open. And then also the need for a supplemental water source. So approvals for a DPR project will include triggers, requirements for triggers for different alarms to ensure that each of the treatment processes is functioning as needed. In the event that one of those treatment barriers isn't functioning as it should, there will be a requirement for the DPR plant to be taken offline until that can be addressed. So in that case, if there isn't a supplemental water source that's been identified, the water system is relying solely on DPR as that extra source of water, they could potentially be short of water during that time period to address that operational issue. So that needs to be considered as well. There's also even more detailed information about treatment plant design considerations. And then, in my opinion, the meat of the document goes through the steps in the process for approval. It's likely you can't actually read these because, the graphic is kind of small, but I will talk through these 10 steps. The first one is performing a wastewater effluent characterization. So again, back to LT2, you need to know what the pathogen load is of a source before you can determine appropriate treatment. And so that's the start of a DPR project. Take your wastewater treatment plant effluent and monitor it so that you can determine how much treatment will be required. Once you know the level of treatment needed, you will design a pilot scale study so that you can take your different treatment processes, take your wastewater treatment plant effluent, run it through that pilot study, and monitor at different steps in that process to determine if your design does indeed produce the quality of water that you're shooting for. We require that the protocol be submitted in advance of conducting the pilot study so that we and the water system are in agreement about what parameters need to be monitored, at what frequency, and at what locations. Once we've reviewed and approved the protocol, the pilot scale study is conducted. The water system gathers the data, packages that into a report, and sends that in to us. After approval of the pilot scale study report, the next step is for the water systems engineer to submit plans and specifications for the plant. Then the plant is constructed. As part, or towards the end of the construction process, a disinfection protocol or CT study will need to be submitted. parameters for verifying membrane performance will need to be submitted and approved. And then after the plant is constructed, then the next step is to prepare for a full-scale verification. So a test was done at pilot scale, but to ensure that that is translated into full scale, the water system will actually go through a full-scale verification test. That water will not go to customers, but instead will be monitored so that results can be gathered, put into a report, and sent into us. And then after TCEQ reviews and approves the full-scale verification test, at that point, an approval to send that water to customers can be granted. So again, just like talking about the costs for a DPR plant can be significant, there's a multi-step process that needs to be followed. So anybody that is considering DPR, we encourage you to budget your time frame accordingly. So why does the TCEQ's approach to this, which is reviewing each project on a case-by-case basis, why does that work? The first one, or the first benefit of a case-by-case approach is the flexibility. We give an example here that a city that was severely impacted by the drought was able to get approval for a DPR project that allowed them to access the extra water they needed to get to the end of the drought. The case-by-case approach also allows for customized treatment, monitoring, and operations. So each approval is going to be specific to a water system. Another example for the customization, back to the first case where the city was impacted by the drought. In their case, they were able to use existing equipment as part of their DPR project. And that was very beneficial for them because it allowed them to move more quickly than if they had to build from scratch. Reuse is a developing field, and by not locking into minimum criteria, but again, reviewing things case by case, it allows innovations in the field to be put into place for new projects that we will receive in the future. And then lastly, the pilot scale and the full-scale verification tests provide the water quality results that are reviewed in advance, ensuring protection of public health. Okay, so lastly, we call this the DPR triangle. And so in the broadest of terms, really any water treatment plant can be divided into three main categories: treatment, monitoring, and operations. And each of these impacts the others. So providing more of one can in some cases mean that less of another is necessary. So for example, the slide talks about providing a greater safety factor by designing the DPR plant with more treatment than is required. In that case, less monitoring, perhaps either frequency or at various locations, may be needed because of the extra treatment safety factor. So at the end of the day, the safety of a DPR project is going to be the same, but depending on the treatment versus monitoring versus operations, the customized approval may look different from one DPR project. And that was all that I had this morning. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anybody coming up short on water and interested in DPR? Dorothy.
Sure. So the question is, how many DPR projects have been approved in Texas? At this time, 2. have been approved. So the Colorado River Municipal Water District at Big Spring has a facility that was approved in 2013, began operation that year and continues. The city of Wichita Falls was approved, and they operated a plant for approximately a year, from summer of 2014 to summer of 2015. There's another water system that is well into the process, and we anticipate will receive approval likely in the next year or two. So that's everything we've got so far. Philip?
Does using direct potable reuse require an amendment to the TIPD's permit for the discharge to allow recapture of that water, essentially passing on the water right from the effluent to be reused as a drinking water source?
So that's where we pull in staff from both Water Quality Division and Water Availability Division. So it'd be our Water Availability Division who would say whether any change to a water right permit would be needed, because in some cases, downstream customers have rights to the wastewater effluent that's discharged upstream. But your specific question about whether the TPDS permit is required to be revised, to my knowledge, it is not, but the 210 reclaimed water authorization, I believe, does need to be revised, because the 210 authorization for reclaimed water use identifies the types of uses that are allowed, and most of those are not written with drinking water as a use until somebody comes to us to talk about it.
Thank you.
Larry, you look like you're formulating a question.
I'm trying to. Systems, is there a protocol in place for direct reuse right there? The other scenario you were talking about. Is there a time frame that you have to hold that treated water before it can be released as the results, or is there a daily testing or something in case the water system gets a slug of stuff in their wastewater in plant that kills their plant or whatever it is, or changes the quality of that inflow? Is there a time frame that water is held before it's released into the distribution system?
So to make sure everybody heard the question, in scenario one, or scenario two for that matter, is there a time frame between when the water is treated at the advanced water treatment plant to when it is released to customers so that sample results can come back to verify the quality of that water? The answer is there is not a requirement to hold it, but at each step of the treatment process, there are specific monitoring criteria that demonstrate that there has not been a failure of an individual treatment barrier. And that's also consistent with the surface water treatment rule. Because we don't have real-time pathogen monitoring, it isn't feasible to treat the water and then hold it until the sample results can come back. So instead, we look at treatment techniques. So we're looking at things like daily direct integrity testing of the membranes to verify that those are functioning as they should. In some cases, it is possible on the chemical side to have continuous monitoring, but for pathogen treatment and activation and removal, we have to rely on the treatment technique approach to ensure that each of the barriers is functioning as it should.
For all removal, yeah.
I still wasn't seeing any online, so if anybody else has questions, I'm sure Joel will be hanging around anyway. But we can go ahead and move to our last presenter of the day, who unfortunately Hannah Evans is out sick, so Stephen will be taking up.
Actually, Jackie's.
Oh, Jackie will be taking up the mantle to get that presentation done for us. So thank you, Jackie.
Hi, this is Jackie Saldani. I'm just trying to get my background here so you don't have to see everything behind me. There we go. Can everybody hear me okay, I'm hoping?
Yes.
Yes, can.
All right, there we go. Hi, I'm Jackie Saldana, the team lead for the Drinking Water Inventory and Protection team. We'll get started. You guys are going to see the agenda here for a moment while I get the presentation started. Once I share, I can't touch anything. There we go. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So we just wanted to go over with you a couple of updates about inventory, some common issues we see. Pardon me. We'll just go over some updates, common issues, and some helpful information for you guys. So first of all, just to explain what inventory is. So inventory is anything related to point of contacts, ownership changes, facility updates, population and connection updates, activity status, merges, consolidations, and if you're needing to change what the public water system type is. And all of those requests can go to this email box, pwsinven@tcq.texas.gov. And you can always check what your current status is by going to the Texas Drinking Water Watch website. So real quick on population connection, population is going to be how many people are served by the water system. Connection, or how many of those actual connections to the houses, for residential, where are you actually connecting to? And we've got the link on here for the connection and population guidance. And how we get that information is through those compliance investigations that are conducted by the regional offices or requests to our PWS NVEN email box. Here are the different points of contact types. Administrative contact, that's going to be your highest ranking official. Your PWS contact, that's going to be maybe an operator or a plant manager, someone you want copied on the regulatory mail or to be contacted regarding the water system, but doesn't necessarily a high ranking in the organization if the water system is owned by an organization. And then we always like to have an emergency contact and then a secondary emergency contact just in case that first contact isn't available. Your financial contact is going to be that person that you want the public health service fee invoices mailed to, or you want contacted in regards to the public health service fee, which is also referred to as the water system fee. And then, of course, the owner is going to be that person who is ultimately responsible for the water system or organization. I'm going to have to go through this a little quickly, but I am going to point you to a website where all this information is also available. But for administrative contract, that's generally going to be a mayor, a president, or an individual owner. It can't be the leasee, operator, or operating company. We do need to have the physical address or PO box for that individual, and that's going to be their business address. And we need to have a phone number and an email address, as well as their title. Public water system, like I said, can be an operator, a supervisor, a general manager. For them, we will need the mailing address, phone number, business or mobile. Both are great. Email address is helpful too. And for your emergency contact, these are the contacts that we collect for Homeland Security. And we have made an online form for you guys to use for submitting those. You can still do the old form too. We're still sending those out, and you can mail those in or send them to PWS NVEN, that same email box where all your requests go. But if you would like to fill it out online, you can go to this form here. We will need the person's name, their mailing address, their phone number, their email address, and it doesn't say in here, but we also do need a title for them. And for your financial contact, same thing, mailing address, phone numbers, email address. So here are some common issues we run into. We're missing contact information. The request doesn't tell us who's being replaced. Or we're missing phone numbers or their job title, or for administrative contacts, there are some instances where we can designate someone else other than the highest ranking official, but we do need a letter from that administrative contact telling us, designating who they want to be that administrative contact. For an ownership change, so this is based on who owns the property where the well resides, or for a surface water plant, who owns that plant. So you'll see here we have to get a core data form, and we also need, if there's a change in ownership, we also need the warranty deed or bill of sale. If it's a utility, we're going to need to see that the sale transfer merger with the Public Utility Commission has been finalized. And here are some common things that we're missing. Maybe the warranty deed. We don't have the date that the ownership change changed. We're missing contact information. We didn't get the core data form, or we don't see that the sale transfer merger has completed or was submitted to the Public Utility Commission. So going into facilities, here are just, I'm not going to sit on this one for too long, but here are the different kind of codes you'll see in CIDWIS. In Drinking Water Watch, I'm sorry, CIDWIS is what we see. And I'll also, on that website, I'm going to point you to, there is this information available on there too. Here are the different types of requests we'll get. Maybe it's to activate a source. And you guys know when you submit something to plan review team and you get that final grant to use, like a new well or something like that, and everything gets approved, we still need something from the system telling us that that system is actually active. That is something that kind of holds up the process sometimes. Some common issues. If the well's been plugged, we'll need a plugging report. If there's an inactivation, we'll need backup documentation for that. Maybe we're missing the reference number to the plan review, and so it just makes it a little slower. We're missing the well ID, or if it's a new source, the treatment plan or entry point information is missing, or the capacities for the tanks and pumps. Just some general information when we talk about activation, that's basically you guys putting something into use. And then if it's inactivation, it's a little different. If it's an entire water system, that water system is dropped below the definition, or it's not going to be serving retail customers, or perhaps it is actually being merged or consolidated into another water system. Lots of information required for activation. It seems like a lot when you look at it on the slide, but basically we need to know the date. We need to have all those contacts that we'll be sending information to that I spoke about earlier. We'll need to make sure we know what the system type is, what's the population, what's the connection, all the facility information. For inactivation, we do require some documentation, as mentioned before. If the reason the system is becoming inactivated is because it no longer meets the definition because it dropped in population or connection, we'll need documentation to prove that. If it's becoming another retail customer of, say, a city or something like that, we'll need some documentation on that. And again, if you're plugging a well or something like that, we'll need to see those plugging reports, and perhaps we'll need a utility bill or some photos and some other documentation to show. For merge and consolidation, the two differences are a merge is when you have two water systems that become one water system. And conversely, a consolidation is more, let's say, a little mobile home park has become a retail customer of a city. And so they're not really merging with the city, but the city is taking them in as part of their retail customers. And so they're under their plumbing regulations. Here's some information about what we would need that. You must be getting water from an approved PWS. Cannot have any treatment or sources of your own. You can't be reselling water, and you have to be within those plumbing restrictions of the water system that is serving you. Some common issues are we don't have enough information to activate the system. Maybe we're missing population or connection or the contacts or the facility data, missing in documentation for an activation, merge, or consolidation. We didn't get any information about why the system is no longer a PWS, or information that shows that how they we didn't get a response from the system, or we didn't get any contact from the system letting us know what happened. So here's a little list of information we'll need. All requests need to go to pwsinvent@tcqtexas.gov. If you have any questions, you can also send them to that email address, or you can call us at 512-239-4691 and just ask to speak to somebody about inventory. And then here are some helpful links. So Drinking Water Watch is the one I mentioned. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it now, but this is where you can see your current information. And this instructions for Drinking Water Watch website is actually very helpful, because if you go to that website, it'll list out, it'll have some presentations up there that has a glossary and several of those little acronyms that you see us use, or that you see on Drinking Water Watch. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, it actually has a lot of the information that I already went through in this presentation. So it'll tell you all the documents you need, where you need to send it, and all of that. Here is the link to the core data form as well, Central Registry, and also the Texas Water Development Board Water Service Boundary Viewer is a good way just to kind of see what's showing for your water system service area. And then lastly, if you have any questions, you can direct them to that PWS-INVENT email box, the 4691 phone number, Hannah Evans, Jacqueline McClure, myself, Jackie Saldana. Or you can ask them right now.
Any questions here? Don't look like we have any online. No? Okay.
If I may, I just want to chime in on this. I asked Jackie and Hannah to put together a presentation for us, and unfortunately she was ill and couldn't present it. And one of the reasons that I wanted her to do that was because we're finding that it's these small details that are really holding up all of the updates in CIDWIS. So the more details that you include, the better. Give us more details than we need. That's great. We really want to make sure that we're getting all the information. I have one system that I have literally spent probably 2 years on trying to get them to update their information with the Public Utilities Commission so that we can inactivate them. The system literally doesn't exist anymore, but because of our processes, I need that information from them to provide information to the Public Utilities Commission so that the Public Utilities Commission can tell us that it's inactivated. And so it is very important that you all are providing that information. And I know everybody that's in this room today, that you're all Johnny on the spot. And maybe I'm just saying this for posterity's sake then. But I do want to get it on the record that we need details, and as many of them as you can provide. And if you have a question, just call us. We're more than happy to help provide the answers, give you exactly what details. Thank you.
Absolutely. I just want to chime in that it's a new year, and this is also a really great time to go into Drinking Water Watch and just poke around. All of your compliance schedules should be up to date. All of your public points of contact should be up to date. Unfortunately, a lot of people have had changes, and sometimes we just don't know about it. So if you can let us know, hopefully that means our communications to you will get faster, which makes everything a little less painful. And that is actually our goal, despite popular belief. So that said, you'll see another like a save the date to let you know, but our next scheduled vlog is going to be for April the 11th. Once again, it's another Tuesday, and we'll probably stick with the hybrid environment. Give people the chance to come here in person or attend on Teams. We appreciate everyone who was able to attend in person, encourage more people to, and really more than anything, just to talk. But we'd rather this be less presentation and more interaction. So if you have any topics that you want to just sit down and have a discussion about, you want to hear what other water systems are doing, we want to facilitate that for you. So if you need to go off the record and pull one of us aside, we will gladly do that and get it set up. And it doesn't have to be that, you know, the city of XYZ asked for this. Just a water system wants to know how other water systems are doing this. We'd obviously love to hear that too, because then we can maybe make our processes work a little bit better. Some processes we can't change, sometimes processes we can. All right, that said, I really appreciate your time this morning. I know we ran a little bit over, but hopefully it was worth your while. So for those of you who are interested, there is also a stakeholder group coming up this afternoon for the lead and copper rule revisions, where we'll be going over the finalized form and some frequently asked questions we're getting. So see you again, potentially between 1 and 2 p.m. this afternoon. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
you.